So hello, everyone. Thank you again for coming and joining with us today. Today is the final part of the Navigating Mainstream Benefits training series on Medicare, Medi-Cal, and covered in California. A quick intro to myself. My name is Sadaka, and I'm a policy analyst here at Home Base. Home Base is a technical assistance provider. We provide TA for COCs across the nation. We work closely with Santa Clara counties, Office of Supportive Housing. One of the many things we do in the scope is bring to you trainings on behalf of OSH, including this Navigating Mainstream Benefits series. And like I said earlier, today is the final day, so thank you all for joining us. And a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. In terms of tech, I know you all are familiar with Zoom by now, but I do want you all to know that we are recording the training, and all the training materials will be sent out and posted to the CoC training website, so don't feel like you have to screenshot anything. We're also going to keep everyone on mute by default, but there will be a time at the end to ask questions by unmuting yourself. Also, please feel free to use the chat if any questions come up. Also, please feel free to raise your hand as well at the end of the training. If you have any tech issues, please email me at sadaka@homebaseccc.org. And closed captions are also available, so if you hit closed captioning, you should be able to see them. And just to get folks familiar with the chat, please put your name, organization, and describe your current mood using only emojis. Just for example, my emojis are going to be a happy face pumpkin and a spooky Halloween ghost, just because it's Halloween. So please feel free to use the chat and get familiar with everyone here. And I'm going to pass it along to Emma, who will be presenting for you all today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to the second half of this training. Before we get started, Sarika talked about a lot of what I, covered a lot of the housekeeping stuff, just a couple of quick points. There will be some audience participation elements later on. We don't have any polls set up or anything like that. It's very low tech, but feel free to put questions in the chat or raise your hand when we get to those parts. I will pause after each main section to take a couple of questions. So put them in the chat as we go along, and I'll take them at the end of, the chunks of the presentation. Last time the presentation, I wrapped it up a little early at the half an hour mark. At the time, we didn't have any more questions pending in chat, but if I logged off too fast to catch anyone's, I want to make sure that anyone who had a question left over from last week, first of all, feel free to ask it today. And if we don't have time to get to it today, please feel free to email me. I'll put my email address in the chat as well, and it's on the presentation. And I should be able to help address that. I'm so happy to have you all here, and we're just going to get started with the presentation. So just one second. Here we are. Okay. So just as a recap for anyone who missed last week, my name is Emma Dinkelspiel. I'm an attorney at the Health Consumer Center. We are an agency at a subdivision at Bay Area Legal Aid. We provide free legal advice and assistance generally to low-income individuals across the Bay at Bay Legal. But at the HCC, we have no restrictions on income or assets, so we can help people both low income and all the way up the income scale. We help people with their, private tech company insurance, and we help people enroll in Medi-Cal, the whole enchilada. Our services are always free. We primarily provide advice over the hotline, but we also do brief service cases and extended representation, including representation at state fair hearings to help address Medi-Cal enrollment issues, covered California enrollment issues, or things of that nature. Our services are provided in all languages. We have a telephone interpreter service. We have a couple of attorneys who speak other languages as well, particularly Spanish is easy to accommodate for us, but like I said, we can accommodate any language. We serve residents of 8 counties: Alameda, San Francisco, Contra Costa, Napa, Marin, Solano, Sonoma, and Santa Clara. Santa Clara County also has a Health Consumer Alliance affiliate. The Health Consumer Alliance is the organization of of legal aid agencies that provide services of this kind, the Health Consumer Center and its ilk. And there's one in every county of California. So if you have a client or a family member or a friend who has a health insurance issue, but they're in Monterey or they've moved down to Los Angeles, they can absolutely get the same services at the same free price by calling the main Health Consumer Alliance line. And our number is on the first page of the slide, as well as the Health Consumer Alliance main central line and Bay Area Legal Aid's main line. All of that contact info is on the slides from last week and this week, which will be provided to you at the end of the training. And I will correct the math from last week. So, Covered California. So, Covered California, last week we spent a lot of time talking about Medi-Cal, and Covered California and Medi-Cal after the Affordable Care Act, after the passage of the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, also known as the ACA, they form a coverage continuum. And what we mean by that is that if you are an able-bodied adult under the age of, or a child under the age of 65, your very likely your eligibility for health insurance will be determined based on your income. And if you are below a certain income amount, you will be eligible for Medi-Cal. And if you are above a certain income amount, you will be eligible for subsidies through Covered California. Medi-Cal is a very expansive program after recent expansions, right? Medi-Cal has no immigration status restrictions. Medi-Cal has no asset restrictions. Those things are not, some of those things are true of Covered California, other things are not. There are more restrictions on what you on receiving Covered California. But when we're just when we're just thinking about it generally, when you're thinking about it, when you're looking at a client and saying, okay, like, do you qualify? What health insurance do you qualify? The first question is going to be, what is their annual taxable income? And the reason for that question is you want to start by asking, are they probably in the Medi-Cal category or are they in the Covered California category? Um, so Covered California, like I said, is a creation of the Affordable Care Act, which created health insurance exchanges on which people can purchase health insurance with the use of tax subsidies um, over the course of the year. And that we'll get into quite a bit of nitty-gritty detail about how that income is calculated. But the basic requirements are these. You have to have an eligible immigration status. Your income must be over the cutoff for Medi-Cal. You must have no other minimum essential coverage. That means no eligibility for Medicare or employer coverage. And the amount that you pay for health insurance will be based on what plan you select and what your taxable income is. That's the basics. Like I said, Covered California comes with financial assistance. Through 2025, as part of I believe it was part of the Inflation Reduction Act, there were expansions passed to the premium assistance. So at the moment, everybody is getting premium assistance through Covered California, no matter how high their income is. That could change at the end of next year, but for right now, that's the federal law. Premium assistance means that you will not pay more than 8.5% of your annual gross income. Now, that's a very high number, and people can sometimes find that that means that they're still paying quite a bit for health insurance if they have quite a lot of money, or money that would be on a federal level quite a lot, but of course in the Bay Area still means you're struggling to get by. Um, but it still puts a basic cap on how much you might be paying over the course of the year. This assistance, these subsidies, are called advanced premium tax credits, and they are paid out directly to the health insurance to reduce the cost of the premiums as in the monthly cost that the family is paying for the plan. Uh, if you have a household income that comes in below 250% of the federal poverty level, you might be eligible for additional assistance as well. Those are called cost sharing reductions. Um, you would be eligible for assistance with your copays. You would be eligible for your assistance with your deductibles, and you may find that those amounts are reduced or even at zero if you enroll in a cost sharing reduction plan. In the coming year, uh, Covered California is piloting a program by which most, if not all, silver plans should have some of these CSRs attached to them. But in previous years and at the moment, you needed to enroll in a silver CSR plan, a silver cost sharing reduction plan to take advantage of that. by the way, what do I mean when I say silver, right? So we've got these 4 tiers of qualified health plans that are for sale through Covered California. And the percentages basically establish how much of the cost of healthcare you're expected to bear. So, 60%, 70%, 80%, 90%, those are the different amounts that the Covered California thinks that that the insurance company is covering versus you, right? So in a bronze plan, you're expected to cover about 40% of the cost of care. Um, that's a very general statement, and it may or may not be accurate, but that's how they calculate the differences. So if you're enrolled in a platinum plan, you can expect to have a very low deductible, a very low out-of-pocket cost, but your premiums will be higher. And the reverse is true for a bronze plan. As I said, for low income individuals, for folks under 250% of the federal poverty level, our strong recommendation is to enroll in a silver plan, a silver CSR plan when possible, because that will reduce their costs across the board. And in general, we tend to recommend enrolling in higher metal tier plans when it's financially feasible, because deductible costs are some of the least negotiable things in the business, right? Like, if you owe the deductible, you owe the deductible, and those numbers can get very high for bronze plans. You're paying a low amount of premiums, but then you have a single hospitalization and you owe $5,000. That's a very difficult position to be in. So it's just something to keep in mind. Let's dig in a little bit more on advanced premium tax credits. So like I said, they're tax credits that reduce the amount of the monthly premium that you pay. They're paid directly by the government to the health plan, and then the consumer pays the remainder. So you get a check from, you get a bill from your insurer each month saying, okay, you owe me $100, and the reason that you owe $100 is because Covered California is paying the remainder. That happens silently. You won't necessarily know off the top of your head, and your clients will definitely not, like that will quite often not know off the top of their head, if unless they have already gone through a training like this, what their advanced premium tax credit payment is, because it's not, it's not the most salient information for somebody to have when enrolled in the exchange. But it is available on the Covered California website. If someone wants to know how much is being paid out on their behalf, they can find that out by logging into their account. The amount that is being paid out on their behalf is based on your annual income. What that means is that if you have a drop off in your annual income, you should certainly report that, because it may reduce your premiums. But what it also means is that if for half the year you have high income and for the half the year you have no income, right? Or low income that puts you over the Medi-Cal cutoff. Let's use that as an example because it's a little bit easier to follow. Let's say that for half the year you're working a seasonal job that puts you at 400% of the federal poverty level. And then, the other half of the year the seasonal job ends and you're at 150. Your your premium amount will still be calculated based on your annual taxable income. So you will still owe premiums based on the total amount that you have over the course of the year, even though in the first 6 months you had the money to pay that, and the second 6 months that money isn't coming in the same way. That's an important thing to prepare for, and to just remember income is annualized. So that also factors into the question of, if you have a taxable lump sum that comes in, a big chunk of money that enters your account, and that brings up your annual income. When you report that, your premiums will go up for the rest of the year, and may even go up retroactively to an extent, or will grow up retroactively to an extent, because of the annualization of your income. So I said your income, your premiums might go up or down retroactively. What does that mean, right? Like what does that look like in the moment? Well, it's not that your health insurance company will start sending you bills and say, "Hey, you turns out you paid the wrong amount for March." That's not what should happen. Instead, when you do your taxes at the end of the year, the IRS takes a look and reconciles your tax credit. They say, okay, so you had a tax credit that was paid out that was $500 a month. I'm looking at your income now. Actually, your income was a little bit lower than you expected. So actually, you should have been getting tax credits at the level of $600 a month, and you paid too much in premium, and here is some money back. Or it might go the other way. They might say, oh, you had a tax credit that was $500 a month, but for 2 months in the middle there, you actually weren't eligible for a tax credit because you had a job, and that job had health insurance. So for those 2 months, we would like those tax credits back. That's so either you'll see a refund or you'll see a tax bill, depending on what way the math works out. I've yet to see a tax error in this kind of thing. It's pretty straightforward math. That doesn't mean that we don't see we don't see other kinds of errors, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Errors are very common in the Covered California process, but generally speaking, this particular process, the tax reconciliation process, tends to go pretty smoothly uh, in terms of the actual, just like how much was your income, how much were you paying, how much is that math working out. Um, you do need to file your taxes when you're on Covered California. That is a requirement. So any year, even if you normally wouldn't or you normally wouldn't be required to, please make sure that if you are enrolled in Covered California, you do file your taxes each year. And again, you must report changes in your income, first because it's a requirement of the program, but also because, it can lead to, if you're underpaying your premiums all year, then you come at the end of the year and you have this huge tax bill that can be a problem. Recoupment on these advanced premium tax credits is capped by income. So I don't have those numbers in front of me, but if you have income below certain limits, 200%, 300%, 400% of the federal poverty level, the amount that you're going to need to pay back, will be capped at a certain amount. So it's not that they will always ask you to pay the full amount unless your family is reasonably, middle to high income. Okay. Um, as I said, for cost sharing reductions, your income must be below 250% for federal poverty level. As of this year, you must select an enhanced or CSR silver plan. As with APTCs, these are paid directly to the health plan, and it reduces your consumers' deductibles, coinsurance, and copay amounts. And next year, all silver, deductibles should be set to zero. These are not reconciled. Don't it is important to report changes in case you become ineligible for a silver CSR plan and have to switch over to an ordinary silver plan, but they don't they don't reannualize your income in the same way as they do for PTCs. You just get them, and then if you become ineligible for them, you stop getting them. So it's important to report, but this is not something that ever gets clawed back. Um, Covered California is, a marketplace. It is an exchange. It is a place where you can purchase health insurance, right? So we've been talking about eligibility for the advanced premium tax credits, and we've been talking about eligibility for the CSRs, for the cost sharing reductions. And I've been using that as a synonym for eligibility for Covered California because that's mostly what people think of when they're saying, I'm not eligible for Covered California. I am eligible for Covered California. What they're wondering is it affordable for me to buy into Covered California? Will I have financial assistance if I buy a plan on Covered California? But sometimes people want to buy a plan anyway. So it's important to remember that you pretty much can purchase a plan on Covered California as long as you have a tax identification number. You can still buy a plan. You're just going to pay in full price. You're still going to pay full price. Uh, Even if you're not eligible for these financial assistance categories. And sometimes that's what people want to do. There are advantages to that. Sometimes you're on Medi-Cal, your income is zero, but you have a ton of money in the bank, and you want specific treatment that your local Medi-Cal plans don't cover. Sometimes you're on Medicare and you're Medicare like Part A, but you don't like any of the Part B plan options and you need a supplemental plan of some kind, and you're willing to pay full price. Sometimes your employer plan is terrible and you need to purchase a Covered California plan. These things do happen. They're rare, but they do happen. And the benefit of purchasing on the marketplace, even at full price, although that is very expensive, is that all Covered California plans are California regulated, meaning that they are covered by California law. They are subject to California determination of whether or not of coverage decisions, of cost decisions, of termination decisions. So you know that you're shopping for something that is real robust health insurance to the extent guaranteed under California law. So even without the financial assistance, it can be beneficial to buy a plan on the marketplace, but often that's out of reach. So let's talk about what makes you eligible for PTCs. First of all, your income must be below 600% of the federal poverty level. That number is very high. That's basically everybody I've ever spoken to outside of, I wasn't kidding before. We do get people who are very high level tech company employees, but outside of that world, um, I think most people are below 600% FPL, even in the Bay. And you must be, you must be there are some people who are between 100 and 138% of the federal poverty level and not eligible for Medi-Cal, but are eligible for covered California. That number is vanishingly small at this point because most of the people who fell into that category were people who had assets over the asset limit, which no longer exists. So you can kind of ignore that category of people. Um, your income is calculated based on Magi income counting rules. We talked about that in some depth last week, but the basic Magi rule is like when you hear Magi, think taxes, right? You're looking at your taxable income, your adjusted gross income, plus your certain Social Security benefits, like your SSDI benefits. Anything that is not taxable in California, generally speaking, that will not be counted under Magi rules unless it's Social Security benefits. And there are also a few additional exceptions here and there, and it's especially important for self-employed people to sit down very carefully with a counselor because usually your self-employment income, like the number of deductions you can take for self-employment income, are there's a lot of them, and you might even you will be certainly eligible for a lower plan than you imagined, like that a cheaper plan than you imagined. That's very common. But sometimes you're even eligible for Medi-Cal, even though you're working full time if you're self-employed, just because of all the deductions you can take. Immigration status, you must be lawfully present. Uh, Caseworkers may have heard the term PRUCOL in the past, meaning permanently residing under color of law. That is a term for public benefits, at least in California, I think federally, that brings together a basket of statuses that make you eligible for and lack of statuses that make you eligible for various different programs. That is not the test for Covered California. Covered California has a slightly higher test. There are specific enumerated immigration statuses that you must have. Uh, so if you are fully without status, you are not eligible for Covered California. But there are things that are sort of quasi-status eligible that might make you eligible for Covered California. For example, DACA. You can enroll for 2024 starting November 1st, so tomorrow, using a special enrollment period, and you must select the option that you gained lawful presence. And you can also enroll in open enrollment for the coming year. So that's just something to consider. Um, Here's the big reason that we see people fall off Covered California or fall off Covered California subsidies. The biggest problem, and which is the biggest problem we get for Covered California, by the way, is people calling and saying, hey, my plan went to full price. What happened? And the answer is they lost their subsidies. And the biggest reason that they lost their subsidy is that they have some form of other minimal essential coverage. Most commonly, that is caused by the county determining that they are eligible for Medi-Cal. Sometimes they are eligible for Medi-Cal. Sometimes that's correct, right? Like, and the county did a research, they determined that the person's eligible for Medi-Cal and they should be on Medi-Cal and not Covered California. Sometimes the county made a mistake. They populated the renewal with old information. They got the household size wrong. They miscalculated something and thought you were under income. Sometimes the county even found that you were not eligible for Medi-Cal, but took so long to do so that Covered California cut you off the subsidy because of a processing issue. Sometimes the other way that people find out retroactively that they have this huge tax bill is when they find out that they are eligible for other affordable minimal essential coverage and didn't realize that that was an issue. So there are two categories of that outside the Medi-Cal context. There's Medicare. When you turn 65, or when you have been eligible for Social Security disability income for 2 years, you become eligible for Medicare. And we talked about that last week, but most people become eligible for what we call premium free Part A, meaning they can get hospital-based Medicare insurance for free. And if you fall into that category, if you have the sufficient minimal work history necessary to get that, then you are not eligible for premium subsidies from Covered California. That's considered minimum essential coverage. And so you need to make sure to cancel your Covered California plan before your Medicare eligibility starts, even if you are not enrolling in Medicare right away, because your Covered California plan will go immediately up to full price and stay at full price, and it's difficult to fix it retroactively. You usually can't. Um, You also can lose your Covered California premium tax credit eligibility if you are eligible for what we call affordable employer coverage. That means employer coverage that costs more than, I'm so sorry, I'm blanking on the exact number. I think it is also around 8.5% of your household, your household income. This used to be a more complicated question there, but the law has been a little rationalized recently. But basically, if your if you yourself, if your personal health insurance would cost more than 8.5% of your income, then you are not required to enroll in your employer coverage. If your household, in, if enrolling your spouse and children would cost you more than 8.5% of your gross income, they are not required to enroll in your employer insurance. But if your employer insurance is very cheap, if it's, below that cutoff and it is adequate health insurance, which most forms of employer insurance are, then you cannot enroll in Covered California with subsidies. So, like I said, that is another form of issue that we see a lot of is folks saying, I didn't realize I couldn't have both. I didn't realize I could be, I didn't realize that was an issue. Um, or I didn't realize that I couldn't be eligible for both. I chose not to enroll in my employer insurance. My Covered California coverage was better. Understandable, but unfortunately, if your employer insurance is cheaper, if it's below this cutoff, that's not an option. There is a calculator on the Covered California site that allows you to run these numbers. So you don't need to, worry about it off the top of your head. You can, compare your paycheck to the calculator and determine whether or not your employer insurance is or is not affordable. And then finally, if you are eligible for free Medi-Cal and you decline it, you can't get APTCs. So it's not optional. You must be either in Medi-Cal or Covered California. Well, you can choose to be in neither Medi-Cal nor Covered California with subsidies. But if you'd like to be on this continuum at all, you must accept your position on the continuum. We talked again about Magi, income last week, but to talk a little bit more about household. Household is calculated a little bit differently for Covered California than for Medi-Cal. Um, when I refer to household, I'm talking about who in a family is together on their health insurance, whose income gets counted together on their health insurance. Um, Usually it is pretty simple. Usually it's you and any tax dependents that you have. Well, you and your spouse and any tax dependents that the two of you share. Something to keep in mind is that a married couple who wants to qualify for cost sharing reductions or premium tax credits, they must file married filing jointly. Where this gets complicated is if you have a couple that has separated due to domestic violence. In that instance, it is possible to still receive tax credits if you file singly, but you must approach it carefully. There are a series of steps that you have to take. Covered California has a guide on their website to what is required to do to claim the domestic violence exception and keep getting your premium tax credits if you are indeed in that situation. So it is an option, but it's tricky. It's not with Medi-Cal where you can just submit a form. And you do need to do your taxes in a specific way. So that's something to keep in mind. Generally will need to be able to demonstrate to the IRS some evidence of the domestic violence as well, so a TRO or something similar. So again, that's something to keep in mind. Covered California open enrollment is starting right around the corner. It's starting tomorrow. It's open November 1st through January 31st every year. When I say open enrollment, that is the period of time in which you can freely select a plan for the upcoming year. You can change a plan you're already on. You can move up and down tier levels. You can change companies, whatever it might be. Uh, you must have health insurance coverage or you will face a tax penalty under your California taxes. So the federal individual mandate saying you had to have had to have health coverage, that is gone. But the California individual mandate is not gone. It is very much present, and those tax bills can be hundreds of dollars. So make sure that you are carrying health insurance coverage of some kind, or unless you are exempt. So what do I mean by what are reasons you might be exempt? One common one is what we call the short gap exemption. If your total time, if there's a hiccup in your health insurance and you lose health insurance for 3 months or less out of the year, that's fine. That's not a problem. Um, if another one is if the reason you lost health insurance was not your fault, if there was, some error that caused you, covered California's error, Medi-Cal's error that caused you to not be enrolled, you can receive an exemption. And then of course, the amount that they actually claim will be based on your household income. So if you are low income, that won't be an issue. Grace, if you don't mind holding that question, I'm almost through the covered California section. I will absolutely take it in a moment. Then outside of open enrollment, you must, what do you do if you miss open enrollment or if your circumstances change over the course of the year? You can enroll in Covered California outside of open enrollment if you fall into a special enrollment period. So what you need is what's called a qualifying life event. You lost a job, you got married, you got divorced, you had a child, you lost your other affordable coverage like your COBRA. There was a natural disaster in your area. A broker lied to you about when you could sign up. There are certain, the SAPs can be uh, decently expansive, but they are time limited. You have 60 days. In some cases, it's longer, but in the majority of these, it's 60 days after the qualifying event. And if you know it's coming, you can sometimes enroll up to 60 days before the qualifying event. And if you miss that window, you are out of luck. So I can't stress this enough. If you are losing your coverage for some other reason and you have one of these qualifying life events, don't miss that 60-day window. Make sure that you enroll within that 60-day window because the, it is very difficult to purchase adequate uh like catastrophic insurance out, these coverage, these enrollment windows apply to almost everything that you can purchase in California. So if you're not Medi-Cal eligible and you're not able to sign up anytime you want, which is basically true of Medi-Cal, there's no open enrollment or special enrollment, you can just enroll. But if you're not Medi-Cal eligible and you need to be able to get health insurance, you don't want to miss these special enrollment periods because that's how people end up without health insurance, which does happen, mostly because of this. You can do it online, coveredca.com. You can do it by phone. The number is on the screen. Uh, if you run into issues with any of that, feel free to give us a call. We're happy to help. They have also licensed insurance brokers listed on the Covered California website. One note that I want to sound here, one note of caution that I just want to raise is that when you search Affordable Care Act or Obamacare or even Covered California in Google, a lot of the time, the first couple of hits that come up are paid scams, are ads for websites that are not coveredca.com. If you are on a website that is not coveredca.com, you are in the wrong place. Let me say that again. If you are on a website that is not coveredca.com, you are in the wrong place. It is, and I'm saying this because you will see that they have very plausible names. They have very plausible layouts. It might say like healthinsurancegov.com or something like that. And you're like, oh, I'm purchasing California health insurance by, I'm making these websites up, but like for all I know, I'm not naming real scams, but like you will log in and you will think you are purchasing your plan on the exchange and you are not. You are buying a unlicensed plan that doesn't provide coverage, that's cited in Georgia, that provides you, nothing that you need. This is not incredibly common, thank God, but we get a few of these calls every year. So when you're trying to determine, when you're trying to assist a client with Covered California, the first question is, can they purchase a plan on Covered California? Do they fit the immigration requirements? Are they able to file taxes in the US? Is it open enrollment or do they have a special enrollment period? And then question two is, do they qualify for financial assistance? Do they have any other minimum essential coverage or do they have an offer of other minimum essential coverage? Are they income eligible? And do they agree to file their taxes in the correct way, including filing your taxes? And do they understand their reporting requirements? So I'm going to go into this example, but before I do, I want to take Grace's question and I'm going to take a look at the chat to see if we have any others.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I just wanted to just reemphasize because I know for many of us on outpatient, when many of our members are frequently moving, and just to minimize the disenrollment from their health plan, is it better to help our members call them in advance when we don't know which address is affiliated with their Medi-Cal to keep them enrolled? Because before, what I've experienced on an inpatient, they would automatically sometimes enroll them on ongoing. But if they don't hear back, then they would. So a lot of it is a hit or miss in my experience. So what's your recommendation to better improve that gap that our members experience?
Yeah, let me make sure I'm following your question. You're talking about members who are Medi-Cal. We're talking about Medi-Cal enrollment for these particular members. And
Yes.
so these are Medi-Cal eligible members who are changing their address and into different counties or within the same county.
Oh, no, within the same county, but because of our population, they frequently move, right? So, like,
Mhm,
a lot of places, their mails get sent there, they get there. So I just would like to know what would better minimize that because not all of them will call on their own, right? So they
mhm.
need our support, and we don't want them to lapse,
Yeah.
given that we're supported also through the Medi-Cal, right? So that's what I'm trying
Yeah,
to ask.
absolutely. That is a great question. I have a section coming up on Medi-Cal for people experiencing homelessness, and we talk a little bit about address management there. I'm going to come back to that. Like, let me know, once I've gone through that, let me know if I haven't answered your question, and I can, try to do a little bit of a deeper dive when we get there.
Sure. Thank you. Just the purpose of running it back to our team to, get ahead of it. So thank you.
No, you're right. It's an important issue, and like for sure. And I hope to be able to answer it a little later on.
Yeah, because we meet a lot of difficulties on the phones, like when
Yeah.
we're not there with the member or
Oh
we
yeah.
we get a lot of runaround with that. So, okay, thank
No,
you.
for sure. It is a great point. So hopefully I'll answer that for you later, and if not, we'll circle back. So in the meantime, I've had the example one up on the screen, and I hope people have read it over. If you want to just start putting in your chat, or if you want to raise your hand, I'm trying to, like, let's say Sean is your client. Um, what are the questions you want to ask Sean to figure out what health insurance option Sean has? Excuse me. And I'll just give it a couple of minutes because I think we're making pretty good time. Take a swing at it. No question too basic. Where do you want to start when you're trying to determine where Sean should be going to get their health insurance? All right, I'm not seeing any responses, so I'll move on. I want to encourage you guys to keep putting these in the chat as you think of them, though. Oh, I think I see something popping up. Can you be on your spouse's plan? Great, that's a great place to start. Are you a taxpayer? What is your income? Thank you so much. These are exactly the right questions to ask. So let's see. First, you're going to want to start with how old is Sean? So we talked about last week, the difference between Magi and non-Magi Medi-Cal, as well as, Medicare eligibility, right? So one of the first questions you're going to want to determine is Sean eligible for Medicare? Should they be enrolling in Medicare? Were they on employer-sponsored health insurance that prevented them from needing to take Part B such that they can get on Medicare now? And then the other question is, what income tests are they using? Are we using the taxpayer test because they're under 65? Are we using the non-Magi, non-Affordable Care Act test because they're over 65? And then of course, if Sean is under 18, it would be surprising if they had employer insurance in that case, but if they're under 18, they'll qualify for health insurance at a higher income level. Then we want to ask if Sean has any other health insurance or any other offers. So that's what that goes to Anna's question here. Can you be on your spouse's plan? Do you have an offer of minimum essential coverage? Are you enrolled in minimum essential coverage? Do you already have Medicare? Do you have TRICARE? Do you have Medi-Cal? Then we want to look at Sean's income. So this goes to Pratima's question. Is Sean a taxpayer? Does Sean have other sources of income? Does Sean have, like, maybe Sean has a rental property that, brings them $2,000 a month, and that's taxable income for them, and they are eligible for Covered California rather than Medi-Cal. Maybe Sean doesn't have any other source of income, in which case their income is now zero, and they should be enrolled in Medi-Cal right away. Uh, Figuring out how much income they have also lets you go to coveredca.com and run the calculator, which will let you do a quick check to see how much they can expect to pay. When you run those numbers on the main website, you can put in the household income, the number of people in the household, and the zip code, as well as their ages, and that'll give you a very quick estimate for the expected cost of a silver plan. You can also go in a little bit deeper to the shop and compare tool, which will show the estimated costs with the subsidy of various different plans at various different levels. So you can look in directly and say, okay, here's how much this would cost you for a bronze plan. Here's how much a silver plan would cost. If you want to go to Kaiser, Blue Cross, whoever it might be. How much would Sean's income be for the month of August? How much will their anticipated income be for 2024? Are they eligible for Medi-Cal retroactively? Are they eligible for Medi-Cal? This is a good place to pause and note something that I didn't note earlier on the slide. If people are very familiar with Medi-Cal, and I hope everybody here is, they'll know that Medi-Cal is available retroactively up to 90 days. If you were eligible for Medi-Cal over those 90 days. So if you just didn't know you were eligible and you didn't apply, but actually you've had zero income for the last 3 months, you can get your Medi-Cal back to 3 months from the date of your application, as long as you ask for it. Remember that you have to ask for it. That does not apply to Covered California. Covered California is only ever available prospectively unless there was an error, unless somebody else messed up. So if Covered California processed your case and said you're not eligible for us, and they were wrong, you can get Covered California coverage restored. But outside of situations like that, where either Covered California or one of their licensees made a mistake, Kaiser or broker or what have you, you're not going to be in a position where you can get Covered California going back. So it's really important to assess for retroactive Medi-Cal for that reason. Then you want to ask, of course, does Sean have any disabilities or have SSDI? That's to see whether or not, again, to see, like, to go back to sort of going back to question one, right? Is Sean eligible for non-Magi Medi-Cal? Is Sean eligible for the 250% working disabled program under Medi-Cal? Are they going to be eligible for Medicare soon if they've been on SSDI for like 1.5 years? Is it possible that their Medicare eligibility date is coming up? That'll help you plan, and also make sure that they know that they have to get off their Covered California plan before that kicks in. These are all just considerations that you can do when you're screening your client. I have a couple of questions that have come in from somebody. I don't know if you want me to, to name you, but because I see it's a direct message, but I'll answer them. One question is, what is the income to be eligible for a family of 6? I will, I will pull up that information on my phone and let you know. But the math is for the adults in the family of 6. We have a full chart. In fact, let me just pause the screen share for one moment. And I will pull so that I can go ahead and pull up the Health Consumer Alliance 2024 income chart while I answer both of these questions. It'll just take me one moment because I want to make sure that everyone has access to this while I answer this, because I think it'll help. Okay. I think the screen share has resumed. Yep. So if you take a look at this chart, this is put out by our parent organization, the Health Consumer Alliance. We put one out every year, and it gives you a chart for the income amounts for, each household size, going from, 1 to I think we go up to 10. I don't have it open because of my screen. I don't have a dual monitor set up where I am. And it also shows you the cutoffs for each different income level. So thank you, Grace, I appreciate that. So when you look at this chart, you'll notice that the income eligibility so for an adult to be eligible for Medi-Cal uh, rather than Covered California, it's 138% of the federal poverty level. And that's true for, your whole household size. So let's say that you have 3 kids, the kids will be eligible. You would go down the chart to, household size, or let's say you have 3 kids and your spouse, you would go down to household size 5, but you would still be looking under the adult 138% federal poverty level cutoff. And you read the chart there. Household size 5, 138% federal poverty level. Are you above or below? For the kids, you go over to 266% federal poverty level. You look at that to see who is eligible, where, and when. And the cutoff for eligibility for this heightened income eligibility level, for most kids, it's up to age 19. There are exceptions for former foster youth. They might get Medi-Cal a little later. Yeah, it's a great table. Like I said, we put that out every year. So keep an eye out for the 2025 version. We usually circulate it pretty widely, and it's always available on our website, which is healthconsumer.org. Okay. So if you outright do not have any form of immigration status, remember, if you're low income, you're eligible for Medi-Cal, right? Like big change, big important change. It is applicable this year. But you can't get Covered California, and you cannot even purchase on the exchange. And you are exempt from the individual mandate. You won't be hit with a tax bill for that because you were not eligible to purchase on the exchange. But you're also not eligible for Medicare. So what should you do? There are county health plans in each county, and I think in all of the counties of the Bay, at least all of the counties of the Bay that I have looked at, that includes health insurance health insurance options for people who are over income for Medi-Cal, but do not have an eligible immigration status to enroll in Covered California. So Healthy San Francisco is the equivalent in San Francisco, for example, there's one for Alameda, there's one for Contra Costa, there's one for Santa Clara. Um, One thing to keep in mind is that those plans also run on the same open enrollment and SEP rules as Covered California. To my understanding, county health plans can sort of set their own rules. They can do what they want. In my experience, what they have chosen to do is to track the Covered California open enrollment and SEP rules. So if you weren't aware that you could purchase health insurance, but you've missed your window, you may still be stuck without health insurance for a period of time or forced to purchase catastrophic health insurance. So it's just something to keep in mind. You might be eligible also for Medi-Cal with a share of cost. If you're not eligible for Covered California, and you're not eligible for anything else, well, but you are eligible for Medi-Cal, but your income is over the cutoff, well, that's when Medi-Cal share of cost kicks in, right? That would mean that you would be paying a monthly deductible for your healthcare to be free. So it's not an ideal situation, but it can mean that you have catastrophic coverage if you have a hospitalization, you won't be paying more than your monthly income for the cost of that hospitalization. So that can be an option for certain individuals, but I would definitely make sure to look into whatever the county health plan is in the county that you're in. So what do you do if your health insurance makes a mistake? State hearings and appeals are the primary vehicle for challenging enrollment issues, subsidy issues, how much you're being asked to pay for your premiums, or if you're being asked to pay for your share of cost, your deductible. Denials, delays in processing your application. Remember, Medi-Cal and Covered California must process your application within 45 days. So if they don't do that, you actually have an actionable right to appeal right there. If you are terminated from your plan, your Medi-Cal or your Covered California plan, and then miscellaneous problems, you didn't get your benefits identification card, you have the wrong gender marker, you can't, speak to anyone in the county in your language, you have the right to appeal all of these individualized actions. The only stuff you cannot appeal are You can't appeal actions that are generally applicable to everyone at once. So if the law changes such that you know, can't receive Medi-Cal without an eligible status, you can't appeal that to state fair hearings because they don't have the authority to make a decision about that. And then you can't appeal, or let me put this a different way. It's not fruitful to appeal through the state fair hearing process um, issues that are not with a state agency making a decision, with one big exception. You do have the right to ask for a state fair hearing for a Medi-Cal managed care plan that is making a coverage decision that you don't agree with. And I'm going to break that out into a slightly different part of this presentation because you also have a different appeal route that I want to talk about. You have the right to request a state fair hearing and appeal any adverse action that's individualized to you. That is generally 90 days from the date of the notice of action. An important note is that has actually been expanded to 120 days for eligibility determinations as part of sort of the continuing public health emergency unwinding. That was a flexibility that expired and then unexpired. But anyway, you still have 120 days for those. Please try to get those in as quickly as possible. State hearing does not always remember that you have 120 days. So it's always better to be within the deadline. You can also take longer if you have a good reason to take longer, but they'll consider that pretty strictly. So one big rule to know is if you didn't get if the county knows you speak Spanish and you get your notice in English, you're considered to never have gotten a notice of action. If the county knows you speak Chinese and you get your notice in Spanish, you're considered never to have gotten a notice of action. Notices must be provided in the threshold languages, the most common languages spoken in a given county, if they, and so if you speak one of those very common languages and you get a notice that is not in that language, that is presumptively not valid and you can have longer to appeal. So that's a really important rule to know because it happens all the time, unfortunately. You have the right to appeal a denial for health services within 120 days from the date of the plan's decision. So you appeal to the plan first, and then if the plan says no, you then have 120 days to file for state fair hearing. It's always good to file the appeal. Well, it's almost always the best idea to file the appeal right away. The reason being, if you file an appeal before the action takes effect, you can get what's called aid paid pending, meaning or continuing aid. Your benefits will continue as they are until you receive a final state fair hearing decision. That also applies if you file a hearing request within 10 days of getting the notice of action. So even if that's, if you get the notice of action on August 29th and it terminates your benefits effective August 30th and you file on September 2nd, you've filed within 10 days of getting the notice. You just need to make sure that you tell state hearings that is the case and they'll, put your benefits back on. That can be risky for CalFresh or for CalWorks because if you are found to have been wrongly paid benefits while the benefits are continuing, you may be asked to pay them back. Medi-Cal will never ask you to pay those benefits back, and neither will in-home supportive services. So for our purposes, it's usually just straight up a good idea to ask for continuing aid. It's hard for that to hurt you in healthcare contexts. But it's, something to keep in mind is that that's not true for other forms of government benefits that go through the same process. When you file a state hearing, you will get a hearing before an administrative law judge. The way that I put this to clients is that it's a formal phone call. You're under oath, but you are on the phone. You have the right to request another modality. If a phone call won't work for you, you can do a Zoom meeting or even an in-person meeting. For Medi-Cal cases, that often means trekking up to Sacramento. Beneficiaries can and do often represent themselves. That's usually fine. But you do have the right to an advocate if you want one and you have someone available, and that advocate can be whoever. If you want your authorized representative to be your brother or your best friend, that's completely fine. It doesn't need to be an attorney, a case manager. You have the right to present your case, to provide oral testimony, and to submit relevant documents and evidence to support your case. The county or the plan also has the opportunity to attend whoever you're challenging, and they must provide a statement of their case. They must do so a little bit in advance so you know what their position is. And after that decision is released, you have a 30-day deadline to request a rehearing if you disagree with the decision that was released. once that decision is made, once the rehearing process has gone through, the decision will take effect, and at that point, the continuing aid will stop if it's negative and you can't get it back immediately. You do have the right to file a lawsuit in Superior Court within 1 year of the date of the original decision. Excuse me. Those are very difficult. That is something that you really do need an attorney for. Well, I should put that differently. You will find very difficult to navigate without an attorney, because it is a full court case, and it will not solve the problem immediately. At best, you'll get an injunction, as part of the court process. And if anyone's ever been in a lawsuit, they're very slow. Um, I want to go back to what I was saying previously about the alternative routes for filing on managed care plans. I don't have slides built out for this because it's in the interest of time, but we do actually have the time, and so I want to make sure that I highlight it. When you are in either a Medi-Cal plan or a covered California plan or another plan that is governed under California law, let me back up. All covered California plans, most Medi-Cal plans, including those in Alameda, Contra Costa, Santa Clara, and San Francisco, but not those in Napa, Marin, or Sonoma or Solano, you have the right to appeal to the Department of Managed Healthcare instead. The Department of Managed Healthcare is the California regulator that governs managed care plans that fall under California's main body of law. And they accept independent medical reviews as well as complaints when you believe your plan is violating the law. So let's say that Santa Clara Family Health Plan denies your request to have a wheelchair covered, and you believe that they've done so wrongly. What you do is you file an appeal with the plan. That's always the first step. They then have 30 days to decide whether or not they've made the right decision, or 72 hours if it's urgent. And then if they send you a negative decision within those 30 days, or if they don't respond, you can then escalate further. And for Medi-Cal plans, you can go through the state fair hearing process, within 120 days of that decision, or within 180 days of that decision, you can go to the Department of Managed Healthcare. We actually tend to recommend going to the Department of Managed Healthcare for denials of ordinary healthcare in the managed care context, even for Medi-Cal plans. The reason is that the Department of Managed Healthcare, that's their full-time job. That's all they do every day. State hearings, here's all kinds of issues. They don't have that narrow domain expertise. So you're going to somebody who is a little bit less familiar with that body of law. And therefore, you might need to do more of the work yourself. The DMHC tends to be pretty up on what plans can and can't do. However, if you're appealing a Medi-Cal specific benefit like transportation or enhanced care management or community supports, sometimes the DMHC will say we don't have jurisdiction over that, go to state hearings. And so it might be worth just going straight to state hearings for those. It'll really depend, and you're also welcome to call us about those questions. The Department of Managed Healthcare does warm refer clients to us when somebody calls in on the helpline to talk to them and says, "Oh, I have follow-up questions." They'll be sent to us pretty. We're the referral source for that. We are an official resource in that regard, but we don't work for them, and we bring cases to DMHC complaints on a decently regular basis. So Medi-Cal for those experiencing homelessness. This is where I'm hoping to go back to Grace's question. Before I do that, let me just check the chat very quickly. Thank you, Grace. I really appreciate all your help. Grace has put the DMHC website in the chat, which includes the button to click to file a complaint with them, as well as their helpline number. My experience with their helpline has been very positive. It's very well staffed, and the people who work there try very hard to make sure that you get your questions answered wherever possible. To return to this question. So navigating Medi-Cal, where do you get it, right? So first of all, let's start with the basic address question, which is where is your Medi-Cal sited, right? You must pick one county as your permanent residence because your Medi-Cal is in basically every instance at this point, unless you have share of cost Medi-Cal, your Medi-Cal is provided through a managed care plan. And that means that you will need to be able to receive care in network. And although you can, in certain cases, request out of network care where it's medically necessary, it's much harder. And you do need to make sure that you have that you are enrolled in a particular plan and that you are aware of where you are getting care, because it will significantly simplify your life if you are not switching between managed care plans on a regular basis. You will have a much better time knowing what doctors are available. Apart from everything else, case management is also run through managed care plans at this point to a great degree. So many of you will drop out of network if somebody leaves their managed care plan, because they are no longer, enrolled in the right ECM program. So, um, Medi-Cal counties can be inconsistent about how they follow the law on whether or not, you're required to have a fixed address. You are not required to have a fixed address. It is completely normal and cognizable in Medi-Cal to have a rotating address. You can use what's it called? General delivery. Um, you can use like to the extent that an agency is comfortable for it, like mail can be delivered to that agency. We've done this on occasion. We prefer not to, but we've done this on occasion. You can appoint yourself the authorized rep for a beneficiary who's homeless and receive copies of all mail sent to them. That's one other option that you can go with. And if somebody just can't prove residency, if the issue is that they can't enroll in a given county because they can't prove residency, but you provide services in that county, um, you can I'm so sorry. I'm gonna just, yeah, there we go. Um, you can provide a letter from your agency providing services to homeless people and say, hi, this person is getting services in our county. They are in our county. Counties are required to accept telephonic attestations and affidavits for Medi-Cal eligibility. This is a really big and important flexibility. Counties cannot say, I need you to sign this by mail. They can't even say we need you to come in person unless there's like a credible belief in fraud. They're required to take your word for it over the phone. So for clients who move around a lot, where it's just not really feasible to get them in physically to an appointment, counties are required to accept their word for it by phone. Uh, this is where I want to come to Grace's question, um, where the issue is often, and I have to say increasingly, that you just can't reach the county at all. There was a recent report that logged how difficult it is to reach various different major counties. I wish it had broken it out further, but the wait times were habitually more than an hour in a lot of the counties we serve. Santa Clara County is actually a notable exception. Santa Clara County actually does a pretty good job of being accessible. There are exceptions, but most of the time you can get through to somebody in a reasonable amount of time over the phone, which is great. And we're really happy to hear that and grateful that they're focusing on making that a priority. I'm not speaking out of turn when I say that that's not the case in other counties that we serve. Alameda and Contra Costa, Alameda in particular, what clients report very, very long wait times, habitually over an hour, and sometimes even that they're just straight up dropped off the phone. Again, this is public information. This is unfortunately something that's very difficult to address. So if you work or live in a county of that kind, your options to call in and give a telephonic attestation might be limited. We generally recommend that clients go in person, but if your client is having insuperable difficulties, that's when filing a state hearing can be really useful. If you can't call your worker to provide the information needed, or if you can't get in person to provide the information needed and the county's refusing to accommodate, that's when filing a state hearing and saying, listen, I've done everything I'm supposed to do, but I can't get through, can, first of all, preserve your right to whatever the benefit is. And second of all, bring the case to the attention of somebody at the county who can take a look at it and try to act. One of the first things that happens when you file a state hearing is that the case is assigned to an appeals officer, who is somebody who works at the county at a slightly higher level, or I suppose I should say at a different level, right? Who has authority to order other folks at the county to rectify an issue. And on its own, it's not the way that you're meant to be solving problems, but it can be a really good way to solve problems. Counties also have different forms of ombudsmans or backdoors or client contacts, right? And depending on the county, that might be something that we have access to at Bay Legal. So that's a situation in which we'd really like to hear from the client as well, especially, before it becomes an urgent problem. We never want to hear somebody saying like, I've been trying to call the county for 2 months. We hear it all the time, but we always hate it because, once you've made a good faith effort, that's when you really want to start trying to go to hearing or pull some strings or try other methods. Counties are required to accommodate beneficiaries based on their disability. You can request more time to provide additional documents. You can request more time for renewals. You can provide your information verbally. You can sign onto your information over the phone. Information requested in the packet can be supplied all of these different ways. Don't let a county tell you that you can't. You can. And then finally, there's always benefitscal.com. It's a better website than My Benefits Cal Win used to be for folks who used to use it. That's where you provide your information electronically to recertify and so on. It's not a perfect system. It's had some bugs. There have been involuntary disenrollments, but it is an option, and it can be somebody who provides their information through Benefits Cal is always in compliance. That's always the right answer, if you see what I'm saying. Like, and it provides a record that you did try to provide the information, which can be really useful if you do need to go to hearing and you need to be able to say, yeah, I made a good faith effort to do it. Okay, we are at an hour and 5, if I'm doing the math right. So I want to start going into some hypotheticals. Before I do that, I want to pause and ask if there's any questions on the substance of what we've talked about so far. And I'm either this week or last week. And then we'll work through some of these examples. And while I'm waiting for those questions, I'm going to put the first example up on the board. And folks can start putting answers to this in the chat as well as questions that they might have. And I'll give it a couple of minutes. Anne asks, can someone get certified in the info that this workshop provides? What link would be good to access for that? We don't offer a certification for this. I don't know if Homebase offers any form of credit for this training. Yeah, okay. Sadika's shaking her head. So this is, I don't think that there is a training credit for this that I'm aware of. But there are similar trainings offered. I don't, on these topics by, I think, most professional associations. So I don't know what kind of credit would be useful to you, but I suspect this is something you can find an educational credit for because they're important questions. Pratima says maybe covered California for the example that Sai might be eligible for covered California. Any other guesses for what programs Sai might be eligible for? Sai is actually eligible for Magi Medi-Cal. This is his income is below the cutoff, which is 1732 a month, right? It's less than 138% of the federal poverty level. He's not disabled and he's under 65, so there's no special accounting rules for his income. So he's eligible for Magi Medi-Cal. And then the second question was, will anything change if his income was for SSDI? Previously, the answer would have been yes, because an asset test would have applied to him. This year, there's no change. It doesn't matter whether or not his income is disability based or not, because asset tests were eliminated on January 1st of this year. I'm going to bring up the next question. And they about Mark, Min, Missy, and Molly. And I'm wondering who you might think might be in this household. While I'm bringing that up, I want to answer Anne's question. if there's a training program to be you're thinking about like being an insurance counselor. There's that I think there might be, but I'm not familiar with it. I'm sorry, because because we focus on providing advice to beneficiaries. Um, it's the kind of thing that, in an ideal world, we'd all be experts on, right? And in the real world, it's very difficult for anyone to be an expert on. This is my full-time job. I am a professional healthcare attorney. And there's lots of the intricacies of covered California law and Medi-Cal law that I'm finding new to me, even after, several years of this practice. So, um, it's an intricate thicket. There's no question that it's deeply complicated. But the more that you know, the more you can arm yourself, your family, your clients, and all around you. And it's, I think it's something that it's just good for everybody to know. We're trying to spread knowledge as widely as we can. If one of your local agencies, if one of the agencies that you guys work at would like an individualized training, you can reach out to me and we can try to follow up and set something up. Um, Mark, Mark is Mark and Min are certainly applying for Covered California separately, right? Remember, Mark and Min are unmarried partners. So they are each filing their own tax household, unless Min is Mark's spousal, is Mark's tax dependent, which usually isn't the case. Their kids would be included in the household of the parent who claims them as dependents for tax purposes. So going back to the household outline for Mark and Min, let's say that Mark files as head of household and claims Missy and Molly, then Mark, Missy, and Molly are a tax household. On the other hand, if Mark files single and Min files head of household and claims Missy and Molly, then Mark's household is just Mark. And finally, maybe neither of them claim Molly. Maybe Molly has a job and she's not a tax dependent, in which case she's her own health benefit, she can be her own health household. Um, This is a refresher from last week. Sally is 59. She receives SSDI in the amount of 1,500 per month. I'm using, yeah, she's got Medicare and had free aged and disabled Medi-Cal for years. She becomes eligible for an additional pension income of $475 per month, and her county has informed her that her Medi-Cal has been assessed a share of cost of $11.90 per month. She cannot afford her medical care with the share of cost in place. What can she do? And I just want to remind everyone, household income limit of 1 at 138 FPL. So yeah, what can Sally do? Oops, sorry. Spoiler there. Shout it out in the chat, anything that comes to mind. Or if folks want to raise their hand and answer out loud, that's fine too. Okay. So her first one thing to keep in mind is that her Medicare shouldn't be impacted. Medi-Cal share of cost doesn't affect your Medicare directly. You still have the right to access healthcare through Medicare, right? So it's not that she'll lose her health insurance, which is a very common concern. But with Medicare Part B, she's only going to get 80% of her health insurance covered, and her out-of-pocket expenses could be high. And with share of cost Medi-Cal, she'll still be paying her Part B premium. So she's right to be concerned. She could try to find an inexpensive health plan and deduct her premium from her income. So Sally's income in this example was 1,500, and then she has a pension income of 1,475, right? I'm sorry, 475. So her total income is 1,975. One thing to keep in mind is that she can immediately deduct the Part B premium that she's been having paid by Medi-Cal. So if that 1,500 number is the number without a Part B premium, you know, if that's a number, you know, with the Part B premium covered by Medi-Cal, her income is actually going to go down in that to that extent. She'll lose 170.74 each month. And so she'll you know, you can deduct that off the top, even if Medi-Cal is currently paying it. And then the other thing is that, so that'll bring her income down to about 1,800, right? And so then she only needs to find what is that, $70 of supplemental insurance, $50 of supplemental insurance each month. So that can to spend down her income to below the sheriff cost limit. She could also consider enrolling in the 250% working disabled program. In that case, her SSDI income won't be counted. Her pension income is below the SSI limit. She needs to find some amount of work, $1 an hour a month, that provides her with, you know, some kind of form of income, and then tell the county that she wants to enroll. These are the two major strategies that we have for reducing sheriff costs for single people. Neither of them is perfect, but they can be really helpful, and they're incredibly important to keep in mind for case managers. I'm going to move past the final example and just come to the end of our slides. Does anyone have any other questions for me today? I know we moved quickly through a lot of good material. I just want to make sure that we have time to answer any additional questions that have arisen. Sounds like we're good to go. Does anyone have any burning questions about Medi-Cal or, you know, Covered California or Medicare generally? Otherwise, I'll give you back the rest of your time.
I just see that, Emma, one thing that I see is like a lot of the people who are the managed Medicares. So when they're falling off on the managed Medicares, it's defaulting to like one or the other. And so when they're reinstating, so some of those have been surfacing
Oh,
with a lot of
when
the
you're saying
managed Medicares.
you're talking about duals, people who are on
Yeah,
Medi,
those dual,
yeah, yeah,
and that's been, I've been seeing that a lot more because they were pushing that Medicares are primarily pushing for like managed Medicare instead of just the quote unquote traditional Medicare. And so
Mhm.
like I've been seeing a lot more billing issues and a lot more members issues on where they're going to connect with their PCPs. So I
Yeah,
hope that
us too.
becomes more clear later. Yeah.
So let me take a moment to address this topic because that's a super important one that we're also seeing an uptick in problems with. Before I say that, I just want to say Pratima mentioned in chat, hope we can reach out to Bay Legal for questions as you know, as we come across them with our clients. Not only can you, we hope you will. Please call in on our main line with the client to the extent possible, or have the client call in. But if you have a technical assistance question that isn't amenable to that, you're always welcome. You know, I have my email on the slide for a reason. Like, you're welcome to reach out, and I'll try to answer it for you. But yeah, for any specific questions, we'll need to talk to the client. So just make sure you call in to get advice. And we know it's complicated. It's quite a tangled system. Grace, I want to go back to your question. So what Grace is identifying, and which we do definitely see as an ongoing problem, is that so for dual eligibles, for people who have both Medicare and Medi-Cal, um, they are required to have a Medi-Cal managed care plan. They're required to be in a plan for their Medi-Cal. They are not required to be in a plan for their Medicare. There is no requirement that they be in a plan for their Medicare, and nobody should be pushing them into it. However, people are pushing them into it. Our elderly members in particular get hundreds of phone calls during open enrollment telling them they need to choose a plan, they need to enroll, they need to do this and do that. And indeed, it is often easier for them to access a PCP or to access care coordination by being in an original Medicare plan. But it is, I mean, not an original Medicare plan, a Medicare Advantage plan, but it is not at all a requirement. And if they want to be on original Medicare, they have the absolute right to do so. Regardless of what plan they are in, their Medi-Cal managed care plan should be irrelevant for basic medical benefits. It should be irrelevant for what PCP they can see. It should be irrelevant for what specialist they could see. It should be irrelevant for anything that is paid by Medicare. Your Medicare doctors, your Medicare benefits need not be in network for your Medi-Cal plan. They only need to be in network for your Medicare plan. That is because Medicare is the primary payer, and then Medicare handles that billing, or your Medicare plan handles that billing with Medi-Cal. You do not need to be in network for the Medi-Cal managed care plan to receive reimbursement through Medi-Cal. It's like that is the rule. And if you have providers who are causing problems about this, feel free to reach out to us. We have some materials. Justice and Aging also put out some materials about this. It is absolutely a new and uptick problem because everyone was required to enroll in a Medi-Cal managed care plan for the first time. And indeed, we see people saying, oh, no, sorry, we're out of network for Santa Clara Family Health Plan. That's completely meaningless, if you're in network for original Medicare, right? Like, it doesn't matter. Who cares? And that should not be causing them issues. And they are not allowed to say, doctors are not allowed to say, well, we just don't want to deal with your plan. For most beneficiaries who are dual eligibles, there are like protections in place for most beneficiaries of that kind. That gets a little complicated. We're not going to get into that today, but balance billing and the practice of turning people away because they are Medi is generally unlawful. Not always, but generally. Justice and Aging is the name of the organization. And I would look up their dual eligible balance billing toolkit for Californians. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the share and give you your time back. I will make the quick corrections on the slide and send it over to Sarika for circulation, but that's it from me.
Thank you everyone for joining today. And like Emma said, I will be sending you all the slides and the recording. So just watch out for that email and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.